Welcome to the Fighter Pilot Professor podcast. I'm your host, Meta. And in the Fighter Pilot Professor podcast, every week we examine world events and your daily life through the mind of a fighter pilot. The episodes answer your questions harnessing my experience in 25 years of flying fighter jets and my PhD in history, policy, and strategy. You can tune in every week wherever you find your favorite podcast. You can follow me on Instagram and on YouTube, the Fighter Pilot Professor. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to episode 23 of the Fighter Pilot Professor. I am your host, as always, Meta, and today we're going to be talking about America's penchant for power projection and the importance of mental preparation when you're doing a task. Hope you enjoy, and we'll jump right in. All right, so the month of April marked several anniversaries of key raids, 3 key raids specifically, done by air power, spread across several decades that, in my opinion, reflect kind of the United States' penchant for power projection. Right? The 3 raids are the Doolittle Raid, Operation Eldorado Canyon, and then Operation Eagle Claw. The Doolittle Raid, launched in response to the Japanese attack against Pearl Harbor, was the first opportunity that the United States had to respond to that attack. And in my opinion, it wasn't really much of a tactical result. You know, some small damage done to a few buildings in Japan, but it was a strategic victory and a morale victory for the United States, and that this was the first time that the Japanese homeland had ever been attacked by air power, right? And so this represented a win because the Japanese government had been telling the Japanese people that they were safe from this sort of attack, and then the United States blew up that notion, right? Of course, by the end of the war, the United States is conducting long-range B-29 raids against the Japanese homeland that were very devastating, and then eventually leading to the dropping of the atomic bomb. But the initial Doolittle Raid represented this risk-taking mentality that the United States has about its power projection, right? The second one, similarly, Operation Eldorado Canyon, was one of the longest fighter raids accomplished by the U.S. Air Force in the history of the U.S. Air Force. And in this particular case, a series of F-111s launched from bases in England to attack targets in Libya in response to Muammar Gaddafi's support of terrorist acts around the globe. So in this particular case, the use of fighters and tanker aircraft and then laser-guided bombs, aka smart weapons, was sort of the first example of how the United States can project power globally at sort of any moment's notice. Right? Obviously, up to this point, things like the B-52 bomber and other long-range bombers existed, but this was the first time that it came in the form of a fighter attack. And this is important because it sort of represents how the United States planned on carrying out attacks in the future. Again, representative of how the United States sees power projection. And then finally, Operation Eagle Claw was an attempt to rescue the hostages in Iran in 1980. Unfortunately, this one went catastrophically wrong and ended up being a failure. However, this very, very complex mission involved multiple moving parts and some of the longest helicopter raids in the history of warfare. And again, in my opinion, this sort of represents another sort of wrinkle in how the United States projects power. So in all 3 of these examples, you see the sort of various forms of power projection, be that via aircraft carrier, like in the Doolittle Raid and on Operation Eagle Claw, or be that via land-based aircraft, like in Eldorado Canyon and in Operation Eagle Claw, right? And so in all of these instances, what you see is the United States using its resources to project power away from its homeland. And obviously, the United States, by nature of the fact that the Pacific and the Atlantic are very large bodies of water that protect the U.S. from outside attack, it means, on the other hand, that the United States has to go abroad, if you will, to project power in defense of its interests. So that's why, in my opinion, these three things sort of encapsulate the way the United States goes abroad, and demonstrates as well the U.S.'s ability to project power quickly in response to events around the world. You see in all three of these events, these missions were put together in pretty short order and planned with a high level of complexity. And in some cases, the end result was very, very unknown, both in the case of the Doolittle Raid and in the case of Eagle Claw. These were very high-risk missions, and in fact, people perished in both of those instances. So it shows that the United States has a willingness to not only project power, but do it in a way that is frankly a little bit risky in some cases, in order to defend what it sees as its interest around the world. And that's important to the way that the United States also conducts, in my opinion, things like foreign policy, and the way that it acquires military technology. So because of all of this, the United States tends to acquire military technology that has long-range strike capability. Also, it tends to conduct foreign policy with the mindset of that we are willing to go abroad to help and support our objectives around the world. So there you go. That's my opinion on the anniversaries of the Doolittle Raid, Operation Eldorado Canyon, and Eagle Claw. Hope you enjoy. Keep shooting me your questions. All right. So in this part of the episode 23, we'll talk a little bit about what we call in the Air Force chair flying. So what is chair flying? Chair flying is basically a fun word for mental preparation. Right? So when you go out to do something challenging, whether it's the first time or the 100th time that you've done it, there's obviously some level of physical preparation that needs to take place, right? Whether that's a test or a track meet or a ball game or flying an airplane, obviously you need to do some physical preparation for that event. And that's going to look like studying, running, lifting weights, preparing, practicing the various skills that you're going to have to do, etc. Right? This physical preparation. I'm going to have to do a bunch of math problems in order to prep for my math test. But there also is a mental preparation part of that, and there's plenty of science that exists out there on athletes and non-athletes, frankly, who step through an event only in their mind. And they do this event only in their mind. There's actually no physical participation in the event. In one case, in one particular study, they have a group of people shooting free throws. And one group shoots free throws. One group doesn't do anything, doesn't shoot free throws or think about shooting free throws. And the third group only thinks about shooting free throws. And the results of the free throw shooting contest is actually really close between the group that physically shoots a bunch of free throws and the group that shoots no free throws at all but only thinks about shooting free throws. So what does that mean? It means that mental preparation is as important, arguably more important, than the physical preparation for doing something. So in the Air Force, we called this chair flying. And what that involved is quite literally sitting in a chair. Usually, back in the olden days, it's usually in front of a poster or a picture of the cockpit of the airplane that you were flying, and you would walk yourself through the various aspects of the flight. So pretending to do the pre-flight, pretending to do the taxi, pretending to do the takeoff, etc. And you would do this mental preparation of what was going to happen and all the parameters of the various events. Again, much like the free throw shooting example, this mental preparation in most cases was just as important or equally important to the physical preparation, the actual flights that you did leading up to this particular event. So what that means to me is that when you set off to do something, it's imperative that you conduct mental preparation in conjunction with your physical preparation for that event. So you have to see yourself through the event, right? Imagine yourself closing your eyes. Imagine yourself doing the math problems. Imagine yourself shooting the free throws. Imagine yourself, whatever that is, running the marathon, right? And here's the important part. You have to imagine yourself doing it successfully, right? So that successful mental preparation will sometimes override the myriad of number of attempts that have come before, even though some of those attempts may be unsuccessful. So that the mental game of actually finishing the event successfully will supplement your physical preparation and make you successful in the end. So there you go. The importance of chair flying. Hope you enjoy and keep shooting me your questions. All right, that wraps up yet another episode of the Fighter Pilot Professor. Hope you enjoyed. Please keep shooting me your questions. You can follow me on Instagram and on YouTube, the Fighter Pilot Professor. And as always, get your podcast wherever you get your podcasts and listen to it there. Hopefully, in the near future, I'll be adding some what I'll call revisits and updates. So little short blurbs on things that I've talked about in the past that are relevant to update as we move along. Have a good one.